I am Carl Gardner. I'm a pancreatic cancer survivor. One of the unique things about pancreatic cancer is that it is rarely diagnosed early on. And most people are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer once it's spread to other parts of the body. And that's certainly true for me. I was a healthy 51-year-old, went to the gym regularly, tried to eat right. And on September 29th of 2011, I had a seizure. I was at work and just started kind of blacking out. I couldn't remember things. I couldn't, as people would come into my office, I could recognize them and see them, but I couldn't remember their names or anything about what I was supposed to talk to them about or anything like that. So they started recognizing that I was acting strange and called an ambulance, and I wound up at Methodist Hospital Germantown, where they did a brain scan and found that I had a tumor on my brain that had caused some swelling to also come around the brain, and that was what had caused the seizure. But as they looked at the scan, the doctors did not think that tumor was a primary tumor. They thought it was some sort of metastasis from somewhere. And they recommended that I go to Methodist University Hospital in Midtown, which we did. And once I got there, they did a full body CT scan, and that's when they found that I had a tumor on my pancreas, which they thought was the primary tumor. I also had 20 metastases to my liver. I had one on the common bile duct, and then as well as the brain tumor and the pancreas tumor. At that point, while we were in the hospital, they really didn't say anything to me about prognosis, but they basically told my wife, don't make any long-term plans and y'all just need to get your affairs in order. I was in the hospital for a week. They did biopsy and proved that the cancer was what's called adenocarcinoma, which is the most aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. And I was in the hospital for a week on steroids to get the swelling in my brain to go down enough so that the doctors didn't feel that I would have another seizure. And then I went home and started trying to make plans. But as I talked to my wife about it and started doing some research and reading online, I realized that I probably had less than 6 months to live. And that was basically the prognosis at that point was 6 months or less, and that was it. So I was quite prepared to die, basically, at that point. I knew that there was not much hope, and I was just ready to make my peace and go on. But my wife didn't want to give up. She just kept encouraging me and just really chewing me out over the fact that, you know, we have to fight this. We have to try to do everything we can do. And she started calling around. She was calling Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins and all the major cancer centers, trying to find out, what can we do? What can we do? And she even sent my scans, that she had CD of my CT scans, sent them to the Mayo Clinic, and they basically wrote back and said that they couldn't offer anything more than just the palliative chemotherapy, and you know, we knew we could do that here. And I did a lot of reading at that point, and Lydia was still encouraging me to really fight, but I didn't have much fight in me. And then I started reading statistics, and I read one statistic that said that of all pancreatic cancers, the 5-year survival rate is 1%. And at first that sounded pretty gruesome, and I knew that with me, with the 20 metastases to the liver and a brain tumor, that 5 years probably wasn't even realistic. But then I thought, 1%, wait a minute. If I have a 1% chance, then that means I can do it, because I'm not a statistic, and I understand in all statistical analysis there are outliers. And there's no reason in the world, if somebody can be a 1%, then I can be that 1%. And that's what really kind of gave me the spark to start fighting. And I had heard that chemotherapy would cause your hair to fall out, so I got out the dog's hair shears and cut off all my hair, and basically decided to go to war on cancer. And my wife did the same thing, and I'm very fortunate to have her because she's a research biologist at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. So she has access to medical literature and publications that are not really in the public eye. And she started doing research looking into publications for anything that was out there that is not standard treatment. And she found a Dr. Bert Berkson, who was having a lot of success treating pancreatic adenocarcinoma with a combination of intravenous alpha-lipoic acid pills, and another medicine called low-dose naltrexone. So she called Dr. Berkson's office, tried to get an appointment. He was in New Mexico. Tried to get an appointment for me, and she was told that he no longer took out-of-state cancer patients, that he was just way too busy, that he couldn't take out-of-state cancer patients. So she asked if she could email him and ask some questions about this protocol. And they said, well, you can send him an email, but he'll never answer you because he's just way too busy. He just can't answer general email from the public. So she sent an email with a list of about 15 very specific questions about his protocol and how he was treating pancreatic cancer. And he answered with very specific answers and lots of details of what he was doing. And I was kind of shocked, and I asked my wife, I said, how did you get him to answer your email when you were told that he wouldn't? And she just said, well, look at the email I sent him. And it was signed in the signature block, Dr. Lydia Gardner, PhD, Associate Professor of Neurology, University of Tennessee Health Science Center. So it wasn't just the general public sending in an email. It was a colleague, another medical professional, asking questions. So he answered that. And then I went to my doctor. I have the most wonderful oncologist in the world named Mike Martin. And we started talking to him about this protocol. And he was reluctant at first because Dr. Berkson only had 8 patients that he had documented in his publications. And Dr. Martin said, this is just anecdotal evidence. It's not a full-blown clinical trial, and I just don't think I can do it. And I asked him, I said, well, what else do you have to offer me but just palliative chemotherapy, and I'm going to be dead in 6 months? Is that basically what I'm looking at? And he said, yeah, that's basically what you're looking at. So I said, well, what do we got to lose? We might as well try it. Reluctantly, he agreed to prescribe everything I needed to do the intravenous alpha-lipoic acid as well as the naltrexone. The problem was that because none of this is approved cancer treatment, the powers that be at his clinic would not allow their staff to administer the intravenous medicine. So my wife had to learn how to set up IVs and access my veins, and we have now for the last 2 years and 7 months been doing this treatment at home on a regular basis, which is really much more convenient than having to go into the doctor's office. The other thing with the brain tumor, I had what's called a gamma knife. It's called stereotactic radiosurgery, and it's basically a procedure where they bolt a frame to your head to keep your head still, and then put you in this machine that has a cap that goes over your head, and there are about 200 gamma ray generators that direct beams of gamma rays into your brain, and then they hit at one particular focal spot. And each beam in and of itself is not strong enough to do anything or do any harm, but when they all 200 of them come together in one spot, it is strong enough to basically damage the DNA of the tumor. So I had that procedure done on my brain tumor, and it has basically killed that tumor. I'm now completely tumor-free in the brain, and I follow up and get MRI scans every 6 months, and I've been tumor-free there for the whole 6 months. So that's wonderful. The other thing I started doing was I started studying a lot about the subconscious mind and how it works and the power of prayer. And I had read somewhere that people with terminal illnesses do better if they're prayed for than people who are not prayed for. So I started studying a lot about why that is and how that works, and how it is that God intervenes in our lives in these ways, and started basically doing a lot of prayer and meditation, and a lot of that communicating with my subconscious in those ways. Then we started on chemotherapy, and I've been doing FOLFIRINOX, which is a cocktail of about 4 different chemotherapy drugs. And as time went on, was doing the alpha-lipoic acid and meditating and doing the chemotherapy. And the next scan showed that the liver metastasis had decreased by 1/2. And the metastasis on the common bile duct was gone. And the pancreatic tumor had not grown or shrunk or done anything. It was staying just static, which was really good news because it's a very aggressive cancer, and to not grow at all, I just thought was wonderful news. So we kept on the same regimen, the same chemo, and eventually it got to where everything was clear. I had no metastasis on the liver, the bile duct was clear, but I still had the tumor of the pancreas. So we thought about doing radiation on the pancreas tumor, and I went to see a radiation oncologist, and we were scheduling the radiation. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, I've never had a PET scan. It's always been CT scans, and PET scans are supposed to glow at any place there's a cancer. So we convinced the doctor and convinced him to convince the insurance company to pay for a PET scan. And when I got that PET scan, the pancreas tumor did not glow. And the naltrexone and alpha-lipoic acid had basically caused that tumor to become what they now call a non-malignant cyst. So the pancreas tumor is still there, but it's benign at this point. So at that point then I was declared no evidence of disease, which was, quite a miracle for someone who had been given 6 months to live. A little later, I had a couple of spots show up on my liver. So we got back on the chemotherapy, and we did a thing called a TACE procedure, which is transarterial catheterization embolization, TACE. This is where they run a long tube up through a vein, a catheter into the hepatic artery of the liver, and injected chemotherapy beads into that hepatic artery, which basically shut it down. Now, the liver gets about 30% of its blood from the hepatic artery and 70% of its blood from the hepatic vein. But when a tumor develops in the liver, tumors have to develop their own blood supply. And they get 100% of that blood supply from the hepatic artery. So basically, we've shut down my hepatic artery, so any tumor that were to form in the liver could not grow and develop blood supply. So it limits its life expectancy there. So we did that, and I was back to, again, no evidence of disease. And several months went by, and a third time I had some metastasis show up on my liver. Both of these were on the outer edges of the liver, and I did what's called for those a radio frequency ablation. And what that is they insert a needle into the tumor itself, and on the head of the needle is a microwave emitting diode. And basically they insert this microwave into your tumor and turn up the juice and basically cook your tumor. So I joked with the oncologist about cooking liver, and we had fun joking about that. And in fact, he said, well, that's actually how we practice, is on cow's liver, and we cook it that way. But that got me again back to no evidence of disease. And time went on, and then they found tumors. 3 of the lymph nodes close to my pancreas were swollen and had malignancy on them. So I'm currently back on chemotherapy, but of the 3 tumors on the lymph nodes, 2 are gone. I'm down to only 1 tumor, and it is so small it's barely detectable. It's about a 2 centimeter little thing, and it keeps shrinking. Every time I get a scan, it's down smaller and smaller. So I anticipate within the next couple of months I'll be again no evidence of disease. So I enjoy telling people that it's now close to 3 years, and 3 years ago I was given 6 months to live, and now it's almost 3 years, and I'm very, very close to being no evidence of disease. And I have lots of things to thank for that. And one thing I didn't mention is that I do also take a lot of vitamins and a lot of herbal supplements. The alpha lipoic acid also comes in pill form. I take that daily. Milk thistle is another thing I take. Curcumin pills I take. Dandelion root, which is a great liver tonic that I also take daily. So I've altered my diet quite a bit. I've cut down on my animal protein significantly. I still eat chicken and fish almost every day, although I go some days on a total vegetarian diet, but I'm not completely vegan or vegetarian, although also I have cut out all milk products. Although I love cheese, and I still eat a little bit of cheese from time to time, and ice cream. Occasionally have to have some ice cream, but for the most part, I drink almond milk on my cereal in the morning, and so try to eat what's generally accepted as a healthy diet. Lots of vegetables, and cutting, like I said, way back on animal protein. Meditation, prayer, support, prayer from others. I put out on Facebook what I was going through and got all of my 200 and something Facebook friends praying for me, and I know that has had a significant influence in what has happened. A couple of other things I read. I did a lot of reading and studying, and one of the things I read was that people with cancer, not just pancreatic cancer, but any cancer, do better with a support group. And that can be a formal support group like the Costin Foundation support group that I'm actively involved in, but also just your family and friends that are very supportive. That's a very important thing. But I think it's very important for me to attend the Costin Foundation meetings. The support that I get from that is just tremendous. The other thing is it gives me an outlet to provide support for others. And that's very important, because another thing I read was that people who face death-defying life challenges, statistically, those that overcome those challenges, be that medical challenge or lost in the woods or any of those kinds of life-threatening challenges, the people that are successful have a burning desire and a reason to live. And I read that and I started thinking, well, what's my reason to live? Well, I've got a daughter. I want to see her graduate from high school and college and get married and have children, and I want to play with grandbabies, and I want to retire and travel all over the world with my wife. And then I thought, well, those things are things that most people want, and it's not uncommon, and they're also kind of selfish. It's all about me. What do I want for me? And I thought, those are not very good reasons to want to live. I need something with more purpose. And then I thought, well, my purpose is going to be that I'm going to beat this pancreatic cancer, and I'm going to show other people how to beat it. And that has become my purpose in life, and that's why the Costin Support Group is one of the very important things for me is because it's given me an outlet to be able to communicate with others with pancreatic cancer and relay my story and help others, to fight this disease and win, because I'm proof that it is not an immediate death sentence. And even though I think most people, and the common conception today is that you get pancreatic adenocarcinoma if it's not stage 1 or 2 where it can be operated on with the Whipple procedure, you're going to be dead before too long. And I'm living proof that that's not always the case. And so that's my message, is that we can fight this disease and we can beat it. But it takes a combination of things. It takes chemotherapy. It takes, in my opinion, alpha-lipoic acid and low-dose naltrexone, a good diet, supplements, prayer and meditation, and that ties in with what I call a good attitude. And a good attitude is not being happy all the time. Good attitude is knowing without a shadow of a doubt that I'm going to beat this thing and I'm going to win. If you don't have that firmly in your mind, you're starting from behind the 8 ball to start with. And so you've really got to know that I can fight this thing and I can win, and be willing to go total, all-out, unequivocal war on the cancer. And that's my secret for success.